Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Guillermo Gutierrez, who is the CEO of Chanel here in Japan. Fantastic to have you.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
And, you've got a very big job here. And I must say, you've got a beautiful building, luxurious. Everything fits in with the image. It's fantastic. Give us the backstory on how you got to become the person running Chanel in Japan. How did that come about?
Right. Yeah. We're talking before. We're originally from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
I always had wanted to work overseas for some reason. Maybe because I spent some time in the U.S. When I was a teenager. And Spain was kind of still a bit of a backward place still when I graduated from university. So I looked for a number of opportunities, and the one that came up was the executive training program in Japan that was done by the European community at the time.
Oh.
They wanted to get specialists in Japan working in business. It's usually sponsored by some European business. And it was the time when Japan was, Japan as number one, as the famous book said. So I applied to that program and I got accepted. And the program was 12 months of intensive Japanese study and 6 months of working for, in my case, for 2 Japanese companies. So, it was a very good introduction to Japan. I learned, I learned a lot. It was the time of the bubble as well. So it was, a different time from what we saw after that. So after that, I actually said, I want to stay in Japan. I'm going to look for opportunities. So I had a number of opportunities, and so I had a couple of jobs, and one of them was Chanel for a while. Then I left, I quit, and I also left Japan about 5 years after I arrived with this program. And then, kind of a serendipity in a way. I happened to meet my first boss here, who was at that time the boss of Chanel in Asia, and he said, would you like a job in Singapore for Chanel? And so I rejoined the company in Singapore, and that was already 30 years ago. So it's been 30 years.
Wow.
And so I've been to Singapore. I've been to the Philippines, Singapore again. I worked in the US and I worked in Paris before coming to Japan in 2009, which is 15 years ago. So, and then within here, I've been sort of in the kitchen. So I ran the cosmetic business, the fashion business, and then I became CEO in 2018.
So you've been here continuously since 2009?
2009, yeah.
Wow, okay, that's quite a long stint.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people say it's long, but
it's usually hard to get such a long, duration stay in Japan.
We are not, Japan is kind of a special place, and we are not a typical multinational, have people staying in countries for a long time. So
it's not unusual.
Yeah? Now it's changing a little bit. We're becoming a bit more like the other companies in a way, but it's quite normal to stay long if there's no problem. And then especially Japan, where you do need to invest the time, I think, to get used to the country and to especially, the big question in Japan is do you want to learn a language or not? Huh? For any person coming here, I think that's
you must be one of the rare executives running a big fashion brand here who speaks Japanese. I imagine there probably aren't that many.
As a foreigner, well, I think we've got Norbert, who is is LVMH, so he speaks very good Japanese. I've seen some others. I cannot just off the top of my head remember, but I think it's a lot more common than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important question, because if you are asking somebody, you go to France, should you learn French? And it's like, of course. But why people are not saying the same thing about Japan? Because it's a more difficult language for Westerners. Yes, I think. But if you're Chinese or Korean. It's like, of course, you just learn it. You
Yeah.
know? So I think things have changed a lot from my first visit here to the second one. I see a big shift, and a lot of young people speak, and in any field you find foreigners speaking Japanese, and a lot more Japanese speaking English, obviously. Both things. Yeah.
And you had a very good background in leadership outside of Japan as well. And so I'm not sure about your first few years here, whether you were actually in a leadership position or not. But when you first began to lead a team in Japan, what were some of the things you found, oh, this is different or interesting or challenging or whatever? What were some things that occurred to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's the myths in Japan, and there's reality. I mean, I think you always have to start from the point that it's not that different. And people react to incentives like everybody else. So you have to understand what the incentives are in a way. And obviously there is a shared way of doing things, shared culture that might be different from other places. So I
wonder about that incentives thing, because I have had a number of leaders here talk to me about, to their sales teams, that they weren't getting the production from the sales team. So they thought, I know, I'll increase the incentives and make it more attractive. And, and they do that, and then nothing changes, And I asked them, I said, well, what's your base salary that you're paying these salespeople? And it's usually very high. And I said, well, there's your first problem. The incentive is not that attractive because they can keep doing their job as they've always done it. They get a very good base salary, and they don't want to, change what they're doing for the incentive is not attractive. So I guess it depends on the industry, perhaps, and it depends on the company. But if you can get them to work to a higher degree through incentives, great. But it's not always necessarily a given, is it?
I think I use the word incentive in a larger
broader context,
not just money, but everything else. It's like what do you strive for what reason, kind of thing. I think you need to understand the motivations in that sense. What are the motivations behind the behaviors? I think, but anyway, I think I think the difference is, some maybe talking internally and then externally. I think they're a little bit different. I think, there is a lot of entrenched custom here. I think so. To break through that is complicated, I guess, for people coming. It's like you do things in a certain way. So especially if you're a foreign manager that doesn't have any friends inside the team, that cannot really take the temperature. So things are interesting. Your things are done in a way, and people don't want to necessarily change them.
No.
So and that is a bit baffling, I think, for a lot of people. I think in terms of how the fact that things take time and that kind of thing. I think on the other side, I mean, the thing that pervades Japan everywhere is the things are done with quality. So that's the reverse of the coin. Things take time, but they're done very well. And that can be a huge blessing. If you have a project, it might take longer, or it might be more complicated to put together. But once you open the door, it's going to be well done.
And is this what you discovered? I mean, when you start leading here, you don't know those things, right? This is all a black box to you. You don't know, and then you think, well, this is taking forever. Why is this taking so long? But then you realize that things move very quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
the quality is very high, and you think, oh, that's...
Yeah, I think that's the experience with a lot of people here. But obviously, it can be very frustrating, especially if your mission is to move things fast.
Yes.
But I think there's also a myth that the Japanese don't move fast. They can move extremely fast. I always bring the similar examples, like when you have this. Remember this sinkhole that appeared in Fukuoka?
Yep.
They fixed it in a weekend. Or when they have a big earthquake or typhoon or whatever, they really fix things very fast. So I think again it's a question of why. I think they want to go back to a normal the way it was before very, very quickly. And that, probably what we will see with the earthquake in Noto Hanto this in January. So I think they can be very fast, but it's a question of what is the pressure to really move fast. Let's say, for example, in I've seen it a few times in our business. We develop something very new with a customer, can be a department store, for example, develop a new format or whatever. The other ones, maybe we've been talking to them for years, nothing happens. One starts to do it, they want to meet you next day, they want to do the same thing immediately.
Right.
So there's this
competition,
there's the competition, there can be this
companies.
tribalism, there can be really
don't let the others get ahead of me.
Exactly.
Oh, they might steal a march on me, I better get in there.
Yeah, I remember those days in the old days when it was this professor from Sofia University who passed away. Unfortunately, this American professor, I missed his name now. He wrote a book called Kaisha, the Japanese corporation, if you saw it. And he gave the example of a battle between Yamaha and Honda for scooters. I mean, I'd say at the peak of the fight they had, they were putting out a product every week.
Wow.
So, they can be very fast.
Yeah.
The problem, obviously, what's missing sometimes is a little bit of prioritization and take the losers, lose the losers if you want quickly and that kind of thing. So they may have a problem doing that. But in terms of raw speed, I think
fast.
They can be really, really fast. So the problem is that usually they are not. But that's the frustration, is how to activate that.
So I think it's also the industry too. I mean, I remember I visited a Mitsubishi car factory in, I think it was in Aichi. And in my youth, I worked on the line in the Ford car factory in Brisbane. So I worked in car factories, and I remember watching these guys putting the windscreens into the cars on the line, and wow, they were moving. I mean, I was watching these guys going, wow, that is unbelievably fast. And that's that factory environment. And when we talk about speed, it's often in the white collar environment where it's not quite the same thing. But it can be. But it's there. Like I was blown away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thinking about your experience, and you can compare Japan with other countries because you've led teams in different places. What have you found works well in Japan to get people engaged in their work?
First, one thing on engagement. I think a lot of the surveys, they give low scores in Japan.
They do.
But I think one has to see how the Japanese are responding to surveys. I just happened yesterday to look at, Tabelog, this website to look for restaurants in Japan. You can look at it in English, but usually a lot of the everything is all the Japanese look for that. They have thousands of restaurants. If you find is maximum 5 points. If you find it 3.4, it's already extremely good. I have not
Michelin 3-star.
I have not seen a 5
ever.
And usually you go to 3.5 and it's a fantastic place. So I think they are extremely... So first, I think there's this tendency not to get very high or very low in Japan, which is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And also to be extremely, how would I say, strict with giving very high points.
Well, I heard that in your industry, in the luxury goods industry, that when you're doing customer surveys after purchase, that I've heard this number, that there's like a 30% difference, that they have to adjust the numbers so they can get some sense of comparison with the rest of the world. That you do it in New York, you do it in Paris, London, and you do it in Tokyo, and it's like, whoa, what's wrong with our service in Japan? It's terrible. Actually, no.
Yeah.
It's that
I was coming to that when you say about engagement. When you do employee engagement service, you have the same problem. You have this, what they call the Net Promoter Score.
Net NPS, Net Promoter Score, yeah.
It's a disaster. But the consultants tell you, oh, it's very good. Really?
Yeah.
And then you look at the same survey in America and it's, oh, everything is good. But then, you scratch the surface. So I think in terms of engagement, I think first the surveys are, not that great at give you the right information. But I think what you have to do is, like anywhere else, you have to walk the floor. So so go back to the ability to communicate in Japanese, etc. I think once you take the temperature, you walk the floor. In our case, we've got 2,000 employees in the points of sale. I walk a lot. I talk to everybody. In general, I know what's going on. So the engagement. In our case, there's a big gap between what the surveys are telling us and what I really sense that things are working. So
the thing is, the questions too. I mean, when you think about culturally, one of the questions that gives a big flag for engagement is, would you recommend to one of your family or friends to work in this company? And Japanese answer, no.
No, of course not. Yeah, no, it's like, I don't want to take responsibility.
Exactly. I don't want to be, the company hates my relative or hates my friend, or then my friend's going to hate me because they don't like the company. I'm not like that sort of accountability. So the answer is no. But in a scoring mechanism, that's seen as a negative number. Oh, they're not engaged, So I think there's that lack of cultural fit too.
Yeah.
And there's one other question, I forget what it is. I remember when we used to have these surveys when I was in banking, and of course Japan was always, APAC was always the bottom and Japan was the bottom of APAC, and you get a lot of grief from headquarters and the HR people in the regional hub about the Japan numbers. And then you look through a couple of things. I look through the questions, I think, well, that's never going to work in Japan. That's never going to work in Japan. And also sometimes the translations. When you actually have to look at the translation of what someone's done, because headquarters gets it translated, right? And then you read the translation here, well, that's not quite the nuance of this question. So there's a miss there too. So I often wonder whether we're actually doing ourselves a favour to actually even run these surveys, or we should do them more intelligently. But,
I think so.
But in terms of, we assume, okay, that probably the scores are not relative, but in just general terms of getting people, more fired up and more loyal and more hardworking, what have you found works well?
Yeah, I think here you have to spend a lot of time talking to people, sometimes outside office hours, and really, get to know them, get to put the money in the relationship bank kind of thing, So when there's an issue, there's a problem, you get the right information and the right feedback. So I think you have to be seen as really being very, very present. You cannot be, I don't think, a distant manager. I think that's lesson number one for me. And it's tiring. It takes a lot of time, but I think that really works. And it sort of filters down. If you showing humanity, I think it filters down to the organization, because then set the tone as to what kind of behavior you're applying. I think the issue here as well, especially as a foreign manager, is about the decision-making process. And I think that's the critical issue in Japan, whether you're a foreign company or in Japan, that leadership is very diluted, or the decision-making process is very diluted. So I think if you're able to say, okay, we make a decision and I take the responsibility.
The leader takes responsibility. I'll be accountable.
Then it's very smooth. Everybody feels good, and there you go. So I think that's also, especially in Japan, people feel like, okay, they look up, whether there's a typhoon or an earthquake or something happening in the company, somebody is there for me, kind of thing. I think that's very important. That feeling of safety,
But why do you think that is? I mean, you've worked in different Western countries where I'm sure in France and America, wherever, people are taking responsibility for their jobs. What do you think it is about Japan that the Japanese don't want to take accountability, that they actually, you sign off on it, great, I'll do it. But if I have to take accountability, no, I don't. It's driving.
Why is that? I think that's really deep in the culture, because you see it in the government, you see, the whole country operates like that. Everything is a big patchwork. So there's no real helicopter view, big leadership. I mean, I think Prime Minister Abe tried to break down the bureaucracy, etc. He managed to a certain way, and they always struggle. This struggle. So it's kind of diluted, with some exceptions actually, and that's also, it's a blessing and a problem. Let me get to it. Let's say all the entrepreneurs that developed Japan after the war, the Sonys, the Matsushita, all these the ASICs, all these companies, these guys didn't have any problem with taking leadership and ownership of things and really go for it. I think once it grew to a certain point and it wasn't as clear what is the next step for Japan, then it gets really diluted and everybody's kind of watching each other. I think that it pervades in is really pervasive in the culture. And you have the exceptions. You've got, let's say, Uniqlo. It's not like that. Uniqlo is like the old companies, like the old Sony, if you want. But it's only one Uniqlo.
One guy,
and
the guy is running the whole thing.
And he's 70 something. So, then you've got the new leadership like Mikitani-san in Rakuten, for example.
Yeah.
He's also that type of leader. And then probably you find a new generation who's kind of waiting in their 30s and early 40s, in the tech industry especially, who are really willing to take risks. So in that sense, I think it's more the environment has pushed the country to behave like that because they've been very successful. So why rock the boat? It's a little bit how I read it, but it's one of those things that it's been operating like that probably since the war in terms of the whole, like, you don't really know who's in charge kind of thing at many levels, with the exceptions that we mentioned before. Yeah.
Do you think it's also to do with Japanese perfectionism? When Japanese are given a task, they take it seriously. I'll give you an example. It's a very cold day today. Fortunately, it's not snowing or raining, but no doubt you've had this experience. You come out of a subway exit onto the street. It's bitterly cold. And there's some poor person standing there in the rain with an umbrella, handing out tissue packs, And they will hand out every tissue pack till all the tissue packs are gone. If that was Australia, they'd dump the tissue packs and go to the pub, get out of the rain. But that Japanese loyalty, yes, this is my job, take it seriously, that perfectionism to do the job extremely well. I guess if you're pitching your standard very high, then you fear about not meeting the standard. So that's where I wonder whether there's a link to the accountability.
I agree with you. I mean, I think the responsibility can be very crushing in that way, because the standards are extremely high. And that's when you see, when they big mistakes are being made, is probably for that reason, taking it too. I mean, the problems we saw at Fukushima, or those buildings that the dampers for earthquakes are not working well. We see from time to time something which is very un-Japanese happening, and it's probably for the very Japanese reasons of that, taking too much responsibility and making something wrong for the right reason, or vice versa. I'm not sure, maybe, but in a sense that they take, the responsibility is so high that you bend the systems to make it somehow work, and that can be quite dangerous. And we've seen a lot of examples in industrial companies in the last few years. Yeah.
And what about getting ideas? Because someone like yourself, you have got really rich experience as an executive in many countries. You've seen many ways of doing things. You've been with the company for a very long time in different roles and different viewpoints and perspectives. So when you come to a job like this, you've got a lot of ideas. Plus, you're getting the information from the machine because you're in that position where you're exposed to a lot of information that others don't get. So there's always the tendency to become, as the leader, the driver of the innovation, the driver of the ideas, which can be good, can also be dangerous. So how do we get the balance so we don't take our leadership position as an opportunity for us to come up with all the bright ideas, and I thought of this great idea, let's start on this, but actually get ideas from the bottom up. What have you found works well to get ideas from the team?
I think if you are able to create an environment where, but first you have to define what things you can play more with, you can take more risks. And being a luxury brand, so some areas which are very tricky and can be decided only at certain places. But for a lot of the initiatives and innovation that we're looking, so it can be in retail, can be in the back office, can be in IT, can be in many other things. If you can create an environment and we say, okay, it is safe to fail.
Now that's a good point, because
go for it.
That's like if we're in a European, American, Australian, Western environment, and we said it's okay to fail because we never fail, we only learn. Everyone's sitting around the table, you go, yeah, that's right, I see that. But as I said before, with that perfectionism of the Japanese, failure, the idea of quick wins, or the idea of fail fast, or the idea of minimum viable product. I mean, no way in Japan. You come up with a minimum viable product here, your brand's destroyed.
Yeah.
So that Japanese sense of quality, it has to be reliable and it has to be everything has to be perfect, to an extreme. So
But if you can
it's
define,
okay to fail. How do you marry those two things together?
Well, you just define success differently, I think. Okay. So we've had many instances. We try something new. Say you do some, we are a selling company. We're not manufacturing. So a lot of what I say doesn't apply to manufacturing, obviously. But you say, okay, let's try something new. Let's see some new type of promotion, some new type of activity, some whatever, marketing activity, whatever. And the result, obviously, in our kind of case, is always measured in sales. Did it work? Basically, they're not. Then if you do that, it can set you up for failure, because then people will sort of make the shift sales from previous weeks to this week, from another place. They'll go, do whatever you want. That it's going to be a success, but you don't know if your experiment worked. So basically, you have to define it differently. Okay, let's see, for example, I don't know how much more satisfaction we get from that, or how many people we can recruit, people who are new to a category or new to the brand or new to whatever. If you define it differently, say, if we do that, it's a success. Then people are at ease to try new things, because they know they're going to be measured by something that can really be measured. So maybe we increase by whatever 15%. Is it good enough? Is it good enough? But we've moved the needle in a direction, and we have an answer to what we wanted. So I try to do a lot of those things like that. But because your point, Japanese have a lot of ideas. Huh? Again, we go back to decision making and responsibility. Huh? So they have lots of ideas in this country. And
that's the point too. Often the ideas emerging. Because often the mechanics of getting ideas out can favor people who are more assertive, a little bit louder, and the very highly analytical types who are really digesting the idea and thinking through many layers down of what could possibly go wrong, and we could do this. They're going very deep. And then others who are introverted, who don't want to speak up. And then you've got the problem, they look around the table, they go, oh, well, he joined the company before I did, and she's older than me, or in the women's case, he's a man, and they're suppressing themselves instead of being able to bring the ideas up, because the environment to actually produce the ideas doesn't suit those different types of people. And so it favors one group. And so the most, aggressive, assertive 4 or 5 people dominate all the idea generation. A lot of the others never even get their ideas out.
I mean, that can happen in any country, but it happens here a lot more, especially with those same.
So have you found anything that's sort of to counter that, to get the people who are a bit quieter, a bit more, deeper analytical, to get their ideas out? We are more an action company, so it's but we've usually I think creating like teams from places that don't have that. Let's say you pull out people from different division in our case, or different departments, and they say, okay, this is what I'm, we have this project or this idea, this whatever. Can we get something? And then they don't feel that as much in a way, because there's no that pressure to either comply or just follow what the boss says and it's the right thing, or that kind of thing. So that is one technique. But in general, what I found is, if the project excites them a lot, then they really if the motivation is high, they really come up with a lot of ideas. And in Japan is interesting, is in our company we have a lot of firsts. I mean, we were already many years ago, but when the brand launched the fashion business outside of Paris, the first place we launched was Japan. We had a fragrance business. When we launched the beauty business, we launched in Japan. When we did our first, we changed our boutique design to what we have today. 20 years ago, the first one was in Japan. Wow! Okay.
So there's a lot of firsts. We just have a new, kind of a service center, after sales service center. It was started in Osaka by us.
Wow!
So it's a lot of firsts, and with that kind of project, Japan is the perfect country, because our global office, they know it's going to be done with quality. To your point before, so I think for us, this I see as a non-French, non-Japanese, this marriage between the conceptual of French, of the French, and the practicality of the Japanese it's the best you can put together. Right. Because the French are very good at concept, at putting the logic there, and the Japanese are very good at just putting the details, and both together. That's why Japan works for Chanel very well since the very beginning, because I think those two things, I mean, there's a lot of matching in the cultures, the appreciation for luxury, for workmanship, etc., but especially that thing between the conceptual and the practical is really, really very good. And the Japanese have a high tolerance for trying new things many times until they get it right. And we see it with our suppliers. I mean, there are things, I say not as a selling company, but I see our manufacturing people that come here a lot. You have some packaging they cannot develop anywhere. They come to Japan and they say, you have to develop this. It has to be thinner, 1/10 of a millimeter thinner, and this and that. Only in Japan. I mean, that's the beauty of Japan. So then you in the end, the end product is I think it's the best with those two things put together. Because sometimes the Japanese on their own, if I look at what a lot of competition are doing, they just threw a lot of ideas to the wall of whatever sticks. Right. That's how you can see. In cosmetics, the local brands, so you can see Toyota, you can see ones like that. They really bring out a lot of products and a lot of failures, and it's a pity because there's a lot of must be a lot of frustration and wastage. So nobody's looking at priority and nobody's looking at a helicopter view. If you can marry those two things, it really works well. And I see it in store design. I see it all the time. That Japanese is very good at detail. They're not so good at zoning, at looking at the big picture, see how the whole flow is going to work. So marrying those two things, and it really motivates everybody because then, the project is exciting. We had things happening during the pandemic, especially because you could not travel, so we had to invent. It was like going back to I think the old people said to the 1970s, where it was so expensive to travel, and you have telex machines, so you had to figure out things on your own. So I think COVID was a little bit the same thing, and we had a couple of projects. I mentioned one before about after sales location. We had another one, a beauty concept, and it was done by Japan with Japanese initiative, and it was perfectly done. So it was it's great. It's a great country for that. But I think that maybe in our case we're special. Because there's a lot of pride in the brand, in working for Chanel, and people know the history, and they really appreciate the values of the brand, and the Coco Chanel and everything else. So there's this pride of doing something that makes the brand proud. I think that also works very well in our case.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. Also, there's a Japanese tradition of kaizen as well, isn't there? So an artisan will not be satisfied with just what they're producing and say, well, we've got to a stage where we stop. They never stop. And that ability to take something and keep working it and improve it, even just little iterations, small little details, which is possibly that you've got that artisan concept in other countries, of course, but I don't know whether you've got that Kaizen concept so much in other countries in the artisan area. So Japan is certainly particular.
It has the Kaizen has a couple of issues. Usually it's good for minute improvements, so you get very far. Japan has proven that. But when you have to make a bigger leap, it's complicated. Yeah. And the other issue is with technology, in software, it doesn't work. I mean, software, you have to launch it at whatever, 95%, and then debug, right? So I think that the Japanese take much longer, and it's impossible to get to 100%. Software is always going to be buggy. Thing is, to what level do you, at what cost, to what level you want to bring it, and how long does it take, etc., etc. And that's why the Koreans, the Chinese, the Indians are faster in software, because they can do a not so good product, but at least they put it out and then they fix it later. Yeah, they fix it later. Yeah.
What about trust? Again, your experience of working across different cultures and thinking about how people work together and how they could trust the leader. In the different jobs you've had here, it sounds like you've moved into different areas of the business. You've moved around, so you've got teams that are new to you, or you're new to them. You're now in a different part of the business. So you've got to keep constantly building trust with people so they follow you. What have you found works well to build trust in Japan?
I think it's, again, what I mentioned before about showing yourself and spending time with people. It's like they really need to know you beyond work in a way. Just how to, can I trust that person? I think it happens anywhere, but I think everywhere in Asia it's a little bit that. Can I trust this person as a person before I can do it in work? So and again, then when new people come, and when you come into a position, and then you're trying to build a relationship, I think really, apart from the usual, the honesty, integrity, and the things that can be applied anywhere, I think Japan is, how much do you really like what you're doing in a way? I don't know. It's difficult to explain in a way, but if they feel you're, going back to engagement. What is your engagement in what you're doing?
As the boss.
As the boss, and are you doing it for the good of the company and not for your own, ladder? I think that is I found that it's very, very important. I mean, people they really look at you as like, is he for real, kind of thing.
Right.
I think you're really being watched all the time in this country. I'm sure I come 2 days with the same necktie. Like everybody knows there's something going on or something.
I had a case recently. I didn't know it. I didn't realize it, but I had an expression on my face. I was under a lot of stress. It was very early in the morning. I was in the office and I was stressed about something. And one of my team members came in. He took one look at my face and he said to me, "Are you okay?" Immediately noticed there was something wrong with me. Now, I didn't know it because I knew I felt stressed, but I didn't realize I was showing it externally. Picked it up straight away because, as you say, they're watching you like an absolute hawk, and every little nuance of your change of mood, or can I talk to the boss about this project today, or should I bring this up tomorrow, or maybe I won't have lunch with the boss today. He doesn't look in a good mood. So yes, I think we have to be careful. And I realized, I'm not masking well enough what's going on in my brain here on my face. I changed my facial expression. So yes, they are careful.
I think the trust outside of the company with your business partners and all that. I mean that is there's a lot of myth there as well, the long term and this and that. But things can turn on a dime. That is also very shocking about Japan because everything was very polite until all of a sudden maybe sometimes it's not. It can be, so it feels very violent because of the contrast sometimes.
And is that switch because the trust has been broken? Is that because
something has been broken, something very wrong. Sometimes you don't really know exactly what it is, but something has happened which is really bad, and then you can people, because there's this whole myth that all the Japanese they always respect the word, etc. I've seen that they don't respect the word. They come and say, "Sorry, what we said a month ago, we didn't say it." And we have to change, and maybe they apologize, maybe they don't. So it's it can happen both ways. So it's not like Japanese are extremely trustworthy, and the foreign manager is by definition maybe less so. I don't think so. Everything can happen everywhere because again, whatever the circumstance happen. I mean, there's the environment of the business or whatever. But I think what is true about Japan is that people appreciate the length in their relationship. So I know this guy for a while. He's been working well with me. So then it's easy to go to the next step. I think that is definitely true in Japan. I think people can compared to a more Western thing that okay, this is what we'll do now. Then next year we'll see what we do, kind of thing. I think they like that comfort in a long-term relationship, and they tend to stick to it. And they have a very good. We've seen during COVID, and they have a great degree. They can really withstand a lot of pain and a lot of things just to keep something going, maybe to the point where it shouldn't be kept sometimes. So that's
I also think about trust too with contracts. I mean, for certain, if we're talking, mega money, that's one thing. But in a lot of cases, agreements, contracts become relative on the Japanese side because they say, well, yes, but our situation has now changed, and we want you to ignore that contract, and we want you to change to suit what is now a new situation. And because we're your client or because we have a relationship, we expect flexibility from you, So I guess it's always a power balance, isn't it? Who's got the power? But it's not like I imagine if it was America, it'd be straight in the courts, a very litigious society, be suing each other immediately. But in Japan, I mean, we're talking mega dollars, it's probably a bit different. But for a lot of things, often I think the contractual document doesn't mean anything if you want to keep the relationship.
You're good. I mean, you want to keep the relationship and the business, obviously, and you're going to have to solve the problem somehow.
Yeah.
So you have to solve it. And if you want to break the relationship, then of course, then there's a different story. But sometimes you know what is written there. It has to be flexible because of that. There is also I think within Japan also there is a. If you go to Osaka, they have a lot more flexibility with things, and they don't like contracts so much, but the things sort of work out.
Mercantile,
exactly,
commercial.
In Tokyo, people are more, by the book in a way.
Yeah, my word is my bond, type of thing.
Yeah. So.
And also, I mean, sometimes what happens, there's got to be a change. The people we're dealing with have to make that change, even though what's in the contract. Otherwise, they lose face. And often we're accepting that to protect their face, to keep the relationship for the long term. So, I think there's a lot of nuance in there about what is actually contractual, what is a relationship, and what is our obligation to the people we've been dealing with to protect them and their career as well, which is another layer which maybe you don't get in other countries so much.
It can be a trap for newcomers as well if they believe too much of that as well. Oh, don't worry, the contracts don't mean you have to solve it, you have to be flexible. Say, I don't want to be flexible in this case. Maybe in that case you shouldn't.
Yeah. There's limits, right?
To say, sorry, that's my line, that's my line. I mean, here and in anywhere, So.
And what other things you found work well in getting trust with the team? When you've come into a new team, and maybe they know you, seeing you around in the company because you've been in a different section, but now you're in this section. In terms of developing that trust with people from the very start, do you have any things you've found work well?
Again, I try to, the organization is changing all the time, so you have new managers, so you have to, really be very much hands-on with especially new people to get used to the organization. I mean, I think honestly it's about spending time, So, go to their team meetings and then go afterwards and get to know everybody and try to know whether things are working at a very basic level. I think from a psychological level even, and then try to take the temperature. I think that is really what works. I said at the beginning, it's very tiring, but I think it's worth it. It's the best way. and then go back to your ability to communicate in what language and all that kind of thing. But that's less of an issue internally in most cases with foreign companies, I think, because you can get people who speak English. Yeah. So.
What about culture? You have the company culture, you have Japanese culture, and then you have your culture. As the leader, you have a view on how your team should operate together as a unit, how we cooperate with each other, how you work with them, how they work with other parts of the organization. We put our own cultural imprint over the organization we're running. And you're now the whole organization for Japan, 2,000 people. So what are your views on building a culture? What have you found works well to build a culture?
In our case, maybe we're a little bit special because, there's a strong brand culture. And basically everybody knows that our job is to nurture the brand and give it to the next person or the next generation in a better way that we found it, kind of thing. So that creates it pervades the culture everywhere. You have an idea and you ask a fashion advisor, is it a good idea or not? And you probably get the same answer as you get from the CEO, whether yes or no. So whether it's right for the brand or wrong for the brand. So that is extremely strong in our company. So
how does it trickle across into leadership though? Because that's the product,
and
that's the image, and you're all defending the image, of course. But in terms of as a leader, putting your cultural imprint onto the team, how does that connect?
So then so you have a kind of a north star of the of what the brand is about. So then any behavior that you're having, is this right for the brand or not? And then you're making that thing in your mind every day and in every meeting, in everything you do. So and everybody sort of gauging. There's obviously the black and the white and all the gray zone in between. But I think and then obviously a lot of things come quite high up because you need a judgment call on so many things. But so in that sense of you cannot have within that a culture of you have cowboys here and people are too conservative on the other. I mean, you cannot have cowboys basically. I mean, you really have to sort of understand the brand, otherwise it doesn't work. So I found in many cases you hire people who are extremely aggressive because they, that's maybe where they came from and that's how they got rewarded, etc. Maybe it just doesn't work because we are not here for the business of tomorrow morning. We're here for are we going to be in business in 10 years, in 20 years? And that is what drives the...
and that time frame is quite specific, isn't it? Because for a lot of companies, American companies particularly, quarterly results. Driven, I mean, that's got to be the craziest idea in the world, to be driven by quarterly results. And you think about, I remember Toyota, I was working in the embassy, I was doing trade promotion, and John McCarthy was the ambassador, and one day we got called up by Toyota. They have this new car called a Prius, and they want to come around and let him have a test drive, And so I don't know why I got involved. I went with him, and we're driving around this Prius. And I remember they lost money on that Prius for a long time. And then, bingo, it became the best-selling car in Japan for like 10 years, But they were prepared to lose money to get the result they wanted, And I thought to myself, wow, that long-term commitment to build a brand and take the losses. Or you see now with Moribiru, with their new thing, Azabudai Hills, how many years it took them to amalgamate the land, and they build this amazing new building and all these new buildings. That perspective, the quarterly results don't really lend themselves to that type of strategic vision. So what does it translate into from a leadership point of view around culture? Is because we've got a longer time frame that we can get to the culture, or what does it mean?
Yeah, I think if you need to make everybody understand that the long term is more important than the short term. And some people can work within that frame, some people cannot. Because some people can say, I don't have the leverage, I don't know how to do it. Say, okay, then maybe you shouldn't be here. That is sometimes the conclusion. So yeah, I think you can instill culture to a certain degree, but obviously you need to hire the people.
So it's the hiring point where you
the hiring point is
get
very
the
important.
right culture fit
Right
on the way in.
I think so.
And I guess
Otherwise,
sometimes too, you find, and we've all had this experience, that the culture fit is not right.
Hmm.
Great job in the interview, looked pretty good,
and it doesn't work. Yeah.
but then you realise actually no, what I
and it's
bought-
not the person's fault either.
Yeah.
It's just it's
Not what we
it's
need,
not a
yeah.
fit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think as a foreign companies in Japan, you have to realize as well. You don't have the cream of the crop from universities in general, because they go to the Mitsubishis, etc. With the exception of women, obviously,
yeah,
which for us is
great. You know,
it's great because we're in
of those 2,000,
female,
how many people would be women?
we are 80% women, roughly. So yeah, it's a fit in that way. So that's worked for a company like us, because then we're very happy to have extremely talented women that can have all those qualities that we're talking about in this conversation. So that's also, I think, a point to look at as a foreign manager. If you need a better blend of men and women, for example, then you might be in trouble, because in the case of the men, you might not get the best you could possibly get, and that creates a sort of a number of problems for performance and everything else that you can think of. Yeah.
In terms of, imagine someone based outside Japan rings you up and says, "Hey, I've got this big job in Japan. They want me to go over there and run the organization, but I don't know Japan and I don't speak Japanese. What? Give me some advice. What should I do? What would be advice you'd give them?"
So somebody who's already committed to come. Huh?
They're coming.
They're coming.
They've
They're
been
coming.
told, okay, you go to Japan and run the organization there. Get to work.
Yeah. I think the things we've found before, just spend time with people. Get to know the temperature of the organization. I think.
And in that point, though, often the dilemma can be that in national organization, yes, English is the language of the organization in Japan, but it's not really.
Not everywhere. Yeah.
And a lot of people supposedly speak English, but actually don't speak English very well. And the new leader can very easily fall into, I would call it, the mistake or the trap of only speaking to the
people
best
that,
English speakers, because they're the easiest to communicate with. You feel the most comfortable with them. So your circle of sphere of influence is incredibly small. And who are you really talking to? And that grumpy person over there who doesn't speak much English is actually a key person that you don't know.
It used to be a big problem. You get the sort of gaijin friendly kind of people that you can communicate easily, and we see that problem when people are talking to our head office people that come to visit. Clearly, that is whoever can speak the best is the best person. Say, no, you're wrong. You got it wrong. But I think you need to make that effort. I mean, even broken English or whatever you can. I think that, and I think also you need to create that environment that people can speak at ease. So you need to be able to take the temperature of the organization. And I think an important advice as well, apart from what we're saying on decision making and take accountability and all that, especially when dealing with other corporations, is find out who's in charge.
Okay, that's a good point. How do you find out who's in charge?
It's not obvious.
It's not obvious. How do you work out who's the key person?
Yeah, because sometimes it's not the title. Huh? It's like, that other person who is really in charge, or sometimes there's somebody who never shows up who's in charge, and so. But you have to find out. So it makes your life much easier, because who. How to approach a project or a business deal or whatever. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere. It's really, really frustrating sometimes, because nothing happens, and then until then you find the right person. I think that is somebody coming in is less obvious than you think. So you really have to make an effort to find who is in charge. And sometimes internally it would happen as well. I don't know, I guess you're a business consultant. I saw many years ago one way of finding how an organization works. You get a consultant inside, and he or she would ask everybody, so when you have a problem, or you need, where do you go? Who do you go to? Kind of simple questions like that. And then start making some mapping. And then you realize that a person who is in theory not very important is a key person in the organization because has all the knowledge or has all
connections
or gets things done faster or whatever reason that oh my god, is that why? So internally can help as well to try to find like who is really pulling the strings inside, and sometimes it's not that obvious. Another thing to tell to a newcomer is not that different, So don't be afraid, Don't be afraid to ask all the stupid questions, to say, well, this doesn't work. Eventually, if it doesn't work in Thailand or in France, it doesn't work here as well. So some things that don't work just don't work. And maybe the Japanese, as we said before, are a bit more, they say gaman in Japanese. They can persevere, they can withstand more pain. But in the end, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I think that. I probably maybe especially in a foreign company, the Japanese are expecting that, that okay, somebody says enough is enough, and then we can move on, especially projects that are kind of a dead horse that they need to be put out of their misery, by somebody. So I think that is also don't buy too much into the myths. I think that's also a message. Try to learn some Japanese. Maybe that's a common advice.
That's a good point. Should they? I mean, you speak Japanese. You came here. You studied Japanese in that early iteration, and it's been a big advantage for you, I'm sure. What about for them? Should they learn?
Yeah, it's tricky because obviously you're busy and Japanese takes much longer, and maybe your horizon is not that long, or maybe you're not sure if it's going to be very long. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. But I mean, I think at the very least, you should be able to, I think people appreciate when you're making the effort and then, say some word, put a speech in Romaji and read it as well as you can. I think people appreciate that kind of effort, that there's a commitment to the country. And I think it would be true in any country. I mean, you come in Spain and you don't make an effort to speak Spanish, there's something wrong there.
That's wrong with you,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also, I guess too, it's handy if you can go to visit clients, because often you turn up, you think how things should be, it's different to what you expect, and you can't understand why we're doing it like this. And often the reason we're doing it like that is because that's the client's requirement, and they're driving, good chunk of the business. So we're making adjustments for the client, but you don't know that. You just think, well, that looks wrong. But being able to even just go and, have interpreters in the meeting with the clients, but just greeting the client in Japanese, polite, that's nice. But also talking to clients, I guess when you get here, it's a big eye-opener to, that's why we're doing that. Now I get it. Or the clients are very demanding, and you realize, well, I can't do that. But I see the pressure on my team to respond to things which I think are not really acceptable. And my job is to maybe, help them to push back on that, or maybe I've got to push into headquarters, or I've got to push into the factory or production or wherever to make those changes to satisfy the client. So
yeah,
I think
that go between, especially if you think, there's a black and white thing. This we cannot accept in Japan, for example. There are many things like that that in other countries you don't hear anything, and in Japan it's unacceptable, and especially things to deal with quality. I mean, we have probably, Japan has a very demanding customers, and you get product returns and all that for things that in the country they don't even see them. They don't even see them.
Yeah, Japan. I mean, that's that. I think I said before. The ability to helicopter up, see the big picture. And then the Japanese side is more the other way, zero down, microscopic. My wife's Japanese, and I notice it. I'm laid back Aussie, big picture sort of guy. No, she's very detail oriented. And if I'm not on top of the details, she tells me, no, you didn't do that right, or this is missing, or what about that? And it's like, lighten up, honey, chill, like, what are you talking about? It's not that important. No, we've got to be like this. So I see that detail orientation is very strong.
Yeah. So I think what you have to help the team with your head office is to make a decision. Okay, this one I will fight for you because I understand it's important. The other one, sorry, there is never going to work, and it's not that important. The thing is how to prioritize. And here they don't prioritize. You can really see that every day.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the old examples of when you see these works at night in the street, and then they in the morning the street is perfect again with a line painted when they have to undo it. It's like the things which are ephemeral, they're still perfect, and it doesn't make any sense. The only logic is that perfection is perfection. If you let go here, is a slippery slope to yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
that's probably true.
yeah.
And if you're going to give some advice to someone apart from what you've mentioned, any other points that you'd bring out for them to think about? You've mentioned quite a few already, but
Yeah, for newcomers. Yeah, I think I see it in a lot of newcomers. Sometimes people get frustrated because of everything we've spoken about. You know, it can be the speed, can be the the opacity, it can be a number of things. If I would say if you don't like it, if in the end it doesn't work for you, you should not stay. You're going to be very, very frustrated. And sometimes you can really understand in probably 1 year. Obviously, you have individual circumstances, etc. The worst managers I've seen are the ones that really don't like Japan. Say, why are you here?
Yeah.
That's really sad, I think.
I mean, I have trouble understanding that because this is such a great place. I wonder what's wrong with you. This is one of the best places in the world. You and I can walk out of your headquarters here in Ginza. There's no litter. There's no syringes. There's no homeless. There's no crime. There's no danger. I mean, it's bitterly cold today. That's probably the only danger. But it's got, compared to a lot of major cities around the world, graffiti everywhere. It's fantastic. So what would be your problem with Japan, I wonder? But anyway, there you go. Tastes are different. But in terms of, if you think about a definition of leadership, how would you define leadership?
Right. I think this is about the courage to make decisions and, move to new things or that's I think the most important one. That part of between management and leadership, that the courage to lead. It's common sense. I really believe that, and also maybe the ability to make changes before you need to. So there's basically something's going to happen, and everybody knows it, and it goes back to courage as well. But that to get out of your comfort zone as much as you can. I think that's how I see it. Yeah.
We've had quite a sweeping conversation today. I'm just wondering, you've got such a wonderful amount of experience here. You're running such a amazing luxury brand with large numbers of people, large number of stores. Is there anything we haven't touched on so far which you think you could add to this topic of leading in Japan that we haven't touched on so far?
I was going to touch more on the subject of women, which we touched for a moment. I think it's obviously the biggest untapped resource in Japan, for sure. So I think they are creative. They are they apply this detail orientation to everything. From we're in the beauty business, so we can really see that how important it is and how amazing they are. They are really super women in that sense. They're in a almost like a different species in that sense, because they are talented. They really take care of themselves, and they can really. I think there is a style of management and the fact that you have to fight harder as a woman in Japan. I think it really gives them that edge that you don't find in men. Men have it in a way, it's not exactly true, but have it a bit easier in a way. Maybe for some things not so much, but but especially in a business environment, I think it's hard for women. So the ones that stand out, that really stand out, and you've had outstanding people. So I think that's something that maybe, I don't know if you're in future conversations you'll encounter. I mean, you've interviewed a few women, I think, already. I don't know if you have the same feeling, but it's something. It's really an incredible resource of this country, I think.
It's a certain, just my interpretation, but I think there's a certain degree of freedom that women enjoy here because expectations are different. The classic male role is the breadwinner in the old days, responsible for the family, should straight and narrow, don't get into trouble, don't be adventurous, just hang in there and somehow it'll all work out. Whereas for women, they don't have that expectation, so they can change companies, they can try things, they got more freedom to fail perhaps, or to switch, or to do whatever they like. And I think this generation of young women who in many cases are not marrying.
That's the other side of the coin.
Well, they decided that, no, I want to have more control over my life. I like my job. I'm married to my job, basically. And I'm going to pursue that as far as I can. Again, I mean, it's got some negatives around population growth, and we're seeing that in terms of the whole demographic shrinking. But there, as you say, you meet outstanding women, and you talk to them, you find out they're single. And you think, wow, gee, in any other major city in the world, a woman like this with this capability, education, talent, wow, she'd be snapped up and married straight away. But often like that. So I always think to myself, okay.
Because their responsibilities when you get married, they're crushing, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
Everything that
they don't have the freedom, and they can't express themselves as much. I guess you've 80% women. You've got interesting thing. Question for you though is, have you been able to export any of your leadership talent pool outside of Japan? Because if I think about 5-star hotel GMs here in Tokyo, right?
Lots of foreigners.
They're all foreigners, right, basically. And then you go overseas. I mean, they do exist, but it's very, very rare that you check into a major 5-star hotel in a major city and there'd be a Japanese general manager. It just doesn't come up. But Swiss, Germans, for example, Spanish, they're everywhere, So I'm just wondering, have you been able to take that talent pool and move them to another part of the business?
It's always the hardest part, I think. We've had some experiences, people sent to headquarters for projects, etc., and even some offers for people to move more permanently. But it is hard. People don't want to leave, and they want a great career, but within Japan. And sometimes you need to be mobile, Hey, I was mobile, etc.
Yeah, you moved.
Exactly, and it's not fun sometimes, and so that is hard, and I see it. It's probably become more insular in the past years, I think.
More so, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I see the numbers of people traveling or people, going to foreign universities, etc., apparently it's going down. So I think there is a tendency, there's kind of back to insularity. And COVID was heaven. Let's close the country again.
Close it off. Perfect.
Yeah, so it's hard. It's funny because sometimes you have people who, studied abroad and they speak good French or English. They could really do it. And it's quite hard. They just don't dare take that step. And maybe, a lot of people come to Japan and maybe half jokingly they say, oh, I understand why the Japanese don't travel overseas. I mean, to your point before, because it's great here. Why would you want to go overseas?
Why would you go anywhere else, right?
Exactly. So that is maybe a pending thing. And obviously we are a French company working in Japan. But if you're like Toyota or Uniqlo, whatever, you need to export managers.
Yes.
It must be a big challenge.
They're struggling. They're struggling with it. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.